It's not my Maryland. It's not your Maryland. It's our Maryland. Welcome to Maryland, Our Maryland, a podcast adventure. My name is Louis Miserendino, and I'm very excited to be with the CEO of Sage Policy Group, Dr. Anirban and Basu.
They're just two economists talk about Maryland, how we're doing economically or otherwise. And so I look very much forward to getting down and dirty in the data, but also talking about how we're doing here in our state and where there's room for improvement.
Does it have to be dirty?
We got to get dirty in the data. Okay, nothing more than that. Okay, I mean, this is not going to be.
I don't mind getting down, but I don't know.
This is family.
This
is a purely family thing, but it's going to be
oriented.
interesting. It's going to be. We're going to try to get controversial sometimes. Maybe say some things that some people don't like. That's okay, because we're going to try to create avenues for people to respond to us, to our podcast. Let's talk about Maryland. I think we're filling a real gap. Not a lot of people talk about Maryland from a data-specific perspective, from a nonpartisan perspective. That's our role here.
Well, we're very fortunate that we do have some interesting data put out earlier this spring by the Institute of Politics at UMBC. Pretty big poll that got some attention, but I think we have the opportunity today to talk about some facets of the poll that people might not have heard about before.
Yeah, 804 Marylanders surveyed in March 17th to March 22nd of this year. The results came out on April 2nd. And among the things of greatest interest was how aware we Marylanders are about our own democracy here, sort of the principles of state government and so on and so forth, and how we organize our government, and what the survey found about our awareness about our own political situation and circumstances.
Yes, the survey asked 5 questions related to Marylanders' understanding of Maryland state government. And there is some overlap with economics here, so we will get a chance to talk some money before too long. You don't have to follow politics too closely to get most of these questions right. So let's talk a little bit about how Marylanders did. First question, I felt was a relatively simple one, and 62% of respondents got it correctly. How many years does a Maryland governor serve in one term? And 62% of Marylanders, of course, knew that it is a 4-year term. I suppose it's good news that 62% got it right, but you seem disappointed.
Louis, that's terrible. Who are these other 38% that don't know that a term is 4 years? I mean, you can guess that simply by knowing that the president's term is 4 years, right? So if you don't know any better, you just say 4 years. Now, here's the thing. Louis is one of the 804 respondents to the survey, by the way.
I was. It's a total coincidence.
But you were. And one of the things he pointed out to me is that actually the way the survey was implemented, that he could actually look up on his phone some of these answers. Marylanders had a chance to actually just look this up on the internet. And even with that power, only 62% said 4 years. I mean, this is preposterous. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, I was fortunate enough to take this poll via cell phone. So I did have as an option looking up correct answers if I wanted to. I did it just to check, I'll confess. I didn't actually look up any that I was completely clueless in. But I think it's okay if you checked to make sure. And I'm not so hard on people for not knowing the answer to this question. So I know you feel like it's ridiculous that someone would not realize that the governor's term is 4 years, but maybe there's an opportunity for teaching here. Maybe some people feel like it's not worth their time to be so engaged in politics. Maybe some people are defeatist. Maybe they feel like there's not much to be gained by understanding this. There's a whole host of reasons that might make some people not as engaged as you might like them to be.
Louis, this is being recorded. What you're saying is really, frankly, to me, crazy talk. Because, I mean, what's more important than our democracy? People have time for TikTok and Instagram and so on and so forth, and to bet on whether or not a certain Celtic is going to make the next free throw or a certain Oriole is going to make the next out, which they will, by the way. But setting that aside, what's more important than this? Our society, our civilization, our freedom. And by the way, these people went to school, presumably. So did no one tell them when they were in school, hey, by the way, the governor's term in Maryland is 4 years. Just so you should know that, right? There's civics, right? There's history, so on and so forth. I think it's preposterous. And it's a real insult in some sense, because it's an insult to democracy in some sense, because people should know these sort of basic fundamental facts. That's my view. I'm a little bit harder grader than you are, perhaps,
Maybe.
But that's what I'm thinking. Go ahead.
So if you dig into some of the demographic data here, now the subsamples are not necessarily as scientifically taken as the macro samples, but older Marylanders did know the answers to many of these questions more often than younger people did. So maybe it's up to the older people to be more teacherly. Maybe that's part of what's there. Maybe it's not always the TikTok or the internet or the wasting time. Maybe sometimes, we're talking about 6 million Marylanders. Maybe sometimes the older crowd has to engage the younger crowd and and let them know what's going on and let them see why it's good for them to know it.
Yeah, maybe Louis, or maybe the younger people should just get a clue on their own. I mean, they can actually look this up, by the way.
That's true.
They actually, there's like, I don't know, artificial intelligence now, but even before that, Google and so on and so forth, it was, pretty simple. You just look it up. Encyclopedias before that. You can go to a library and just look at these things up.
All true.
And so, and I don't know, I was surprised that such a paltry proportion of Marylanders knew that the governor's term is 4 years. And by the way, these are people who are saying yes to being surveyed, right? So these might be people who are pretty confident about, oh yeah, let's survey me. Let's do this because I'm very knowledgeable. 62% of that group said, oh, it's 4 years. What did the other people say, by the way? How many, was it?
16% of Marylanders said that they did not know. 15% said it was a 2-year term, and 7% said that it was a 6-year term. Only 1% refused.
Okay.
By the way, 64% of Marylanders said that they pay attention to news about Maryland state politics, some or a great deal.
Yeah, that's true. And I think they get much of their political news from television, by the way.
And that was borne out in the survey. Many people said that they get news from local television sources.
So I would ask our local anchors, whether on WBAL or whatever channel we can think of, WBFF, whatever it happens to be, could you at some point tell people that the governor's term is 4 years?
Periodic review sessions.
Just periodically just say that, just so they know that.
Yeah.
I beseech you to do that.
You're sounding like a boomer a little bit, trying to put all the blame on the youngsters.
I'm Gen X, baby doll. But anyway, yeah, I get it. I get it.
Fair enough.
I'm sounding a little old and judgmental. I get that. But maybe I am that.
When you're talking about millions of people, there could be some people who are stuck in some very difficult things and don't have the opportunities to learn.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, so let's look at the next question here. The Maryland General Assembly, Anirban, that would be the legislative branch in the state of Maryland.
Thank you.
For those, I'm trying to work a review in for people who might not know. The Maryland General Assembly meets once a year. How many days is their legislative session? And on this question, Anirban, only 29% of respondents came up with the correct answer of 90 days.
Yeah, this is a tough one, I got to tell you, because I think a lot of people know it's roughly 3 months. They know that, right? It starts in January, ends in April. But then 90 days, that's pretty specific. So I don't know if people could say 92 days or 91 days, and that was considered incorrect. But I'll give people a pass on this one, because that's a tough question, right? To be that specific. Again, a lot of people know it's around 3 months, but they may not have known that it's specifically 90 days.
42% said don't know. So I suspect that they were being honest then. They weren't trying to guess.
Yeah, they're not trying to impress people by saying, I don't know. That's not impressive. So yeah, I'm sure they're honest about not knowing.
10% said that it was a 30-day session. How fun and quick would it be if the session were only 30 days long?
So much better if it's just 30 days. Not much legislating then, right? Because you only got 30 days. 90 days, we get that. And, again, one of the roles of this podcast, Louis, is to inform and educate, right? I mean, there might be some people out there, maybe they took part in the survey.
That's why we should try to be encouraging.
Look, we can do good cop, bad cop. My point is simply this. I mean, people respond differently to different teaching techniques. Some people actually respond better to people who are harsher and more demanding. And then some people respond better to people like you, a softie. So that's okay.
I am a softie.
But we are imparting information.
And I respond better to softness as well. Maybe that's part of the reason why.
I get it. Third question.
I think the third question was quite difficult. I think you'd have to follow very closely to get this one right. The Democratic Party has long held the majority in the Maryland General Assembly, the state legislature in Annapolis. About what % of seats do Democrats currently hold? I think that if you were a casual observer of Maryland politics, you could know that the Democrats have a clear majority without knowing the exact percentage. The correct answer is the range of 71 to 80%. So 21% of respondents scored this correctly. The Democrats hold 136 out of 188 possible seats in the General Assembly. We have a bicameral legislature. There is the House of Delegates and the Maryland State Senate, and the Democrats have a big veto-proof majority in both of those houses. 71 to 80% to the Republican minority that is quite small.
It's quite small, and we can talk, one day we'll talk about the implications of that for legislation, for the state's financial situation, its economic situation, its business climate, et cetera. But for now, I would agree with you, that's a tough question to answer precisely. I think people have this very strong notion, the Democrats is a blue state, Democrats control, but to know specifically that it's between 71 and 80%, well, that's some heavy lifting, I think. So
yeah, that's
another
tough
pass on that.
I give the 21% a lot of credit.
I do
Even
too.
if they looked it up, I'm okay with
Or
it.
they guess. I mean, there's some statistics here, Louis, right? Some people are just guessing. And
yes.
sometimes the guesses are correct. So, I mean, how many people actually knew this versus how many people just guessed it and therefore turned out to be correct? I don't know. But the point is, it's a tough question.
Oh, yes. In the Maryland State Senate, 34 of the 47 seats are held by Democrats. And in the House of Delegates, 102 of 141 seats are held by Democrats.
That's interesting. That's interesting. And we'll see now, of course, this is an election year. So we'll see if the Democrats gain seats or the Republicans gain seats. It'll be just very interesting. And we'll talk about it.
I'm wondering how you feel about this. This might be a little bit down in the data or a little bit down in the information. But in Maryland, the entire General Assembly is up for re-election every 4 years. So the House of Delegates and the Senate. The governor is also up for re-election on the same cycle. So we don't change a major portion of our state government every 2 years. At the national level, every member of the House of Representatives is up for re-election every 2 years, but only about a third of the senators. And of course, there are off-year elections. Not every election occurs when a president is up for re-election. What do you think it means that we kind of have everyone in place for all 4 years and don't change a portion of it? We don't get to have the so-called referendum on how the governor is doing.
Well, probably at first blush, it means less accountability, right? Because you got 4 years and there's nothing the voter can do about it if you're doing a really bad job as a legislator. Let's say you're not showing up at committee meetings, that kind of thing.
Which happens sometimes.
You can't do anything about it for 4 years. Unless, of course, that legislator is censured by their own colleagues. That's possible. But the voters don't have an option. The other thing about it is that our 4-year election cycle occurs during non-presidential election years.
Right.
And that means that turnout may not be that great in our off-year elections, meaning that if, for instance, the governor was running for re-election in 2028, when the president is being elected as well, you're going to have a lot larger turnout. So it means that a smaller group of Marylanders are making decisions about who's going to be in the legislature and who's going to be governor. And that I could view as somewhat problematic, right? So between a 4-year term, even for people in the House of Delegates, and the fact that these elections take place off presidential election years, it suggests that, my goodness, the influence on politics could be quite concentrated in the hands of relative few voters.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how Marylanders understand Maryland's role in the House of Representatives at the national level. Maryland has 8 seats in the United States House of Representatives. How many are held by Republicans? The correct answer, of course, is 1, and 30% of respondents scored that correctly.
That's right. And again, Marylanders did not do well on this. Of course, that one Republican happens to be a gentleman named Andy Harris, as it turns out. But yeah, again, this reflects the fact that Maryland is a blue state. And I think if you follow politics relatively closely, you should have known this, right? Andy Harris is the only congressperson who is a Republican that we send to Washington, D.C. The other 7 congresspeople are Democrats. And by the way, the 2 senators are Democrats as well. If you think about our delegation, 9 out of 10 senators and representatives together are Democrats. So 90% Democrat, right? So this is a wildly blue state. And that has implications for all kinds of things, including the economy. We'll talk about that as we go through the future podcast. But again, this was somewhat disappointing to me that more Marylanders did not know this, because Andy Harris is in the news a lot. And often when we talk about Andy Harris, we talk about him as being Maryland's sole Republican representative to the House of Representatives.
There's been a lot of talk throughout the United States, including in Maryland, about the correct way to draw up the boundaries of the districts for members of the House. The 8 members of the House in Maryland are not at-large representatives. They don't each represent the entire state. They each represent a district within the state. And there's a lot of discussion about the best way to draw a map. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it should be the case that the voters pick the elected officials, not the elected officials picking the voters. And throughout this country, gerrymandering, as we know, has become very popular, right? Trying to create these very artificial districts that concentrate a few Republican voters in one district or a few Democratic voters in one district or whatever it happens to be, so that the party in power is advantaged. So if it's a Republican area, we elect more Republicans. If it's a Democratic area, we elect more Democrats. Of course, there's been a controversy in Maryland recently. Been the spate of gerrymandering that began in Texas under Governor Greg Abbott there. It spreads to California and then a bunch of other states. Some states have refused to gerrymander, like in Indiana, but the politicians there really paid for it, the Republican politicians in their primaries. And in Maryland, of course, Governor Wes Moore has been pushing to try to gerrymander our state even further to knock out our one Republican district. Senate President Bill Ferguson, of course, has been pushing back, not wanting to do that for a number of reasons. I'll leave it to the audience to figure out what's right and what's wrong. But at the end of the day, I think you want to carve out districts that allow, for natural geographies, as opposed to these really artificial geographies in which we're trying to figure out who should be elected, which Democrats should be elected, how many Republicans should be elected, so on and so forth. I hate that. And I think it's really bad for the country because in these gerrymandered districts, what you get are the extremes. People on the extreme right, people on the extreme left, because it's a left-leaning district or it's a right-leaning district. You don't get people in the middle. We can't talk to each other anymore, Louis. And so as a result of that, we don't get much done. We can't pass a budget at the federal level. And you can see what's happening in our state. But again, we'll talk more about these during future podcasts.
Well, let's talk a little bit about budgets. The fifth question in the survey, does the Maryland state government currently have a budget surplus or a budget deficit? So this was a multiple choice question like the rest of the questions, but there aren't that many choices when the issue is either there's a surplus, a deficit, it's balanced, or maybe you don't know or refuse. 61% of respondents were correct. There is a budget deficit. Now, that deficit is a structural one right now. Maryland is, like every state, required to balance its budget within a fiscal year. But if we look ahead to the next fiscal year, Maryland is not on track right now to make enough money to cover all of its expenses. So 61, perhaps because there are more educational efforts on this. You hear a lot of politicians talk over and over and over again about how things aren't easy right now, that we're going to have some potentially difficult decisions to make down the line. So 61% of Marylanders are aware of the budget deficit. I know you're very aware of it and have some thoughts to share on it. What do you think about the fact that, well, I know you're not impressed by 61%, but it's a very high percentage correct compared to several of the other questions.
Yeah, that's right. But also this is a tricky question because really, as you pointed out, Louis, actually a state has to have a balanced budget every year.
That's right.
And so in response to the question, is it a budget deficit or surplus? I would have said, it's a balanced budget. Now, that's separate and apart from whether or not we have structural shortfalls budgetarily, which, of course, we do each and every legislative session. Next legislative session, we'll see what it is. But this legislative session, if I remember correctly, it was in the range of $1.5, $1.6 billion. The previous legislative session, it was around $3 billion. But so we have this structural shortfall, and it's going to get worse going forward. By the year 2030, I believe it's $3 billion is expected shortfall. But we're going to balance our budget because we have to. You have to. So this is actually a tricky question. I don't love the way it's worded. And so I'm going to say to my fellow Marylanders, good job. It's a tricky question. 61% in this context is quite respectable.
See that? There's a little encouragement.
Yeah.
A little positive feedback.
Yeah. You have to have, when the Orioles are losing, you have to be positive about something. And so we're trying to be positive here.
Yeah. Well, in the survey, they did ask about baseball. They wanted to know what percentage of Marylanders like baseball to begin with. So about 33% of Marylanders said that they're not really a baseball fan. But baseball fans like us, they do tend to prefer the Orioles to the Nationals. About 40% of Marylanders said that the Orioles are their favorite team. 16% said the Nationals, and 9% said some other team. So we like the Orioles, but we do have to be aware of the fact that if our listeners are representative of the state, maybe 16% of Marylanders do like those Washington Nationals.
Yeah, and this is also the group, I'm guessing, that did not know that the governor's term is 4 years. That's my guess if they're Nationals fans, right? This is not the brightest of the Maryland bunch. I mean, you look at the Orioles symbolism, right? The Maryland flag symbolism, so on and so forth. That's Maryland's team. The Baltimore Orioles. And by the way, what a rich tradition. Now, look, I understand the Nationals won a World Series a few years ago. So there might be some
more recently than the
fair
Orioles.
weather. Yeah, well, we haven't won one since 1983. But the point is, there might be some fair weather fandom out there. But my goodness, if you're from Maryland, be an Orioles fan. What's wrong? And by the way, love baseball. What are you doing? You're going to tell me you don't love crab cakes? You don't like Old Bay? You don't like the Chesapeake Bay? I mean, really? I love the Orioles. Yeah, they're losers. I get that, but I love them.
If you were born in the last 20 or 30 years in Silver Spring and your parents work in Washington, you work in Washington, A lot of your friends are more Washingtonian. Why should that fan pick the Orioles over the Nationals?
Because it's a more illustrious, historic franchise, Louis. It's more elegant. Look at our uniforms. Look at our mascot. Look at our ballpark. Look at our incredible ballpark. That's why you're an Orioles fan, is because we got it all except for the victories. We got it all as a baseball franchise. So that's why I'm saying that. This is Maryland. Washington, D.C. is another jurisdiction. Right?
Though it is on land that was gifted by Maryland.
Yeah, which makes it worse. So
maybe a softer approach is you could like both teams.
I think that's wrong. They're
in different leagues.
Growing up, I grew up in Illinois, as it turns out. You couldn't like both the Cubs and White Sox, right? You had to pick and choose. If you're from Central Illinois, you couldn't like both the Cubs and the Cardinals. You had to pick and choose. So I think the same thing here, right? And by the way, the Nationals and Orioles play each other once in a while. They play each other. And you got to pick a side. Who are you going to choose, right? You should choose the Orioles. And by the way, if you choose the Orioles, you probably know that Maryland's delegation has 7 Democrats and 1 Republican congressperson. You probably know that the governor's term is 4 years, because that's what you expect from Orioles fans.
I like the Orioles. For me, it's the Orioles above everyone else for sure. But there are some politically savvy people who like the Nationals, I suspect. They probably know a lot about a lot of things government related.
Okay, all right.
Well, Anirban, do you have any closing thoughts as we bring this pilot episode down to the wire?
Well, I want to tell the audience that the next few episodes are going to be very much focused probably on the economy and where we are as a state. It's a state that's losing jobs, where unemployment is rising. We have that structural financial shortfall. Obviously, you got the blueprint for Maryland's future educational reform, so on and so forth. All these kinds of issues we're going to unearth during the future podcast. But I hope you like this initial pilot episode. And we're going to continue to focus on Maryland and our future, our collective existence.
I hope that we'll also have the chance to talk about some history stories along the way too. More than just fun facts, actual tales that might have some bearing on things that are going on now. I'll try to bring a teacherly approach to it.
By the way, Louis is an amazing economist. He's also an amazing historian. And so you're going to hear a lot of stories about Maryland's history. It's one of the lengthiest histories in America, of course. We're one of the original 13. So look forward to that as well. But we're going to try to bring you non-biased, nonpartisan information about Maryland, our existence again. And so, hey, keep listening. We're going to keep talking.
That's right.
See ya.